Well, basically, this panel was put together based around the idea of social clubs and as opposed as it relates to memberships and crews and things of that nature. Um, and I wanted to start with Craig Cannon because
Okay,
um,
because
because of the parties that you guys were throwing in South Shore that was strictly membership only that grew and led to you guys this
okay,
opening the warehouse and but it was all member. Tell us about the importance of those parties and why it was membership only and how that all was created.
um, I'm first I want to say that I'm Robert Williams. He's my mentor, and like I used to like follow him around like a lost puppy, wherever they were at, wherever we were at. I would just follow him around, and I would notice everything that he did, even what he wore, and I just wanted to be him so bad. So I did get a chance to grow up and be him. And so now we're the last two relics left to tell the story. So we're trying to get the story out before it's too late. What Duane is talking about, and I have to speak on this, often, and people are often surprised about it, is house music got started at house parties. House music didn't get started when Frankie came here. No shade. But house music started at house parties. Now, there's different people that jumped on the bandwagon, after the wagon was rolling down the hill, and they wasn't really old enough. And I'm standing in the club with Robert, and you could tell we're kind of aged. And I didn't see none of these people just claiming that they was there. You know what I'm saying? So, even though there were several locations, I was always a house mouseketeer under Robert Williams. So he always let me in and all this stuff. So anyway, what happened was this. We were all living in South Shore. Lonnie Fulton, Robert Williams, Ronnie Hardy, me, Kurt. We were all living in South Shore. And South Shore at that time had converted over from having large family apartments to chopping up apartments and making them smaller. But a lot of the apartments that were still large, we had parties in, and house parties, and so we had house music. We had Gerard turntables, the kind with the arm that goes over that drops the stuff down. Yeah, we had two of those. That's what we used to play on. And so what happened was at that time, 45s were a big thing. So in order for us to make extended mixes of songs that we danced to, we took two 45s and mixed them together. And that made the song, especially if the crowd responded to a really good part of the song, we just drill it in. Y'all know how Ronnie played First Choice? Whew. Okay, so that's how it got started. So, but you had to be invited by someone who was already there. Like it wasn't open season like anybody could come. Like if Kurt got an invitation and I wanted to go, I had to ask him, Kurt, I want to go to this party, da 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 da. So it wasn't totally open. And at this time, it was strictly LBGT because what happened was we went to the local clubs we were discriminated against and asked for passports. And so we felt that was unfair, so we, do what we do. We create our own thing, so that's what we did. And the house parties moved from different spaces. And they were very elaborate. Let me tell you, they were very, very, very elaborate. And when it got to the point where the police had caught up with us because we were, it was a lot and the neighbors were calling and all of that, we had to move to a place where we thought that we would be bothered a little less and that we could accommodate the numbers that were coming in. And so after the house parties got shut down by the police and the ordinances changed, that was change number one, Robert decided to go get this place on Clinton, like 100 and like 11, 112 South Clinton, right by the train station. And so that was our first party outside of a house. So naturally, we had all this space. We had strobe lights. We thought it was like Soul Train. It was like everything to us because at the house parties, we couldn't, these were industrial spaces, so we didn't get a chance to like zhuzh them up so much. When we got to industrial space, especially the first one, all the effects and lights and streamers and huge sound system, bigger than we had ever had before. I mean, you could hear, like coming to the party, really, you could hear it like 2 blocks away, really. And so that was the first one that they had on Clinton. And I remember Robert collaborating with some other people in order to have that function. It went for like 2 weekends, and then it burned down. And it burned down with the Alltech Lansing Voice of the Theater speakers that we had rented inside the unit, inside the loft, because we weren't supposed to be in there anyway. So it burnt down. The rental equipment burnt with it. And for the longest time, Robert and Ziggy had to fight in court about the equipment that was lost in that fire. In the meantime, buy some other equipment and have a party somewhere else simultaneously. So this is where I cut my teeth and learned how to adjust. So pretty much after that, we just went from one industrial space to the next. Ultimately, we got to 206, and when we were having the South Shore parties, I was DJing the house party. So Robert thought that this was a good chance at 206 to give me a chance to actually spin for a large crowd. And so that was kind of fun because, they had a Bozak mixer. Y'all, thank you all, y'all to know. So I had knobs instead of slides. And plus Richard Long from New York had come and put in this wonderful sound system with tweeters in the ceiling and all of this stuff. So personally, I wanted more. It was like once I actually did that function, like I got bit. And what happened was, I said, as soon as I turn 21, I'm going to the big gay club where the big gay DJs play. And that's what happened. That's really what happened. When I turned 21, instead of just working Saturday night only from 6 at night till 6 in the morning, I went to the Ritz, which was at 937 North State. It's a Walgreens now. But when I still drive past there, and my heart is still in that space. We talk about mapping Duane and I all the time, and a lot of the locations where we had stuff has been covered up 2 or 3 times. But it was there, and so I had a chance to work there 4 nights a week. And that was a lot more than I was making working just Saturday night. And so then they had to, they tried a bunch of DJs, and so Robert knew Frankie from New York, Frankie came in, and that's kind of what happened. I don't want to hog the time.
So what year was that? What year was it that you were 18 years old? What year are we at this time?
1972, 73.
Wow. Right.
But it all got started with the LBG community, and I have to keep pushing that because that's the part that everybody wants to sweep under the rug. And I can't let that part. Just read my book. It's called Housestory, and you'll get all this all over again in full detail.
Okay, we'll be looking for that book, right?
Oh, it's coming.
But yeah, that's another bigger part of the story, though, is that you saying 1972, 73, when on record it's saying 1977. It was the whatever. So that was my point on the panel before, is about the things that occurred in Chicago that were happening before this big bang. And another thing so that brings me to Kirkland Townsend, who started DJing in 1975.
Thank you.
With Mendel, which I told him earlier, he wanted me to send, he gave me his PayPal and Cash App because I told him I owe him a debt of gratitude. I owe him because of his work is how I got my walk into the house community, and as well as so many of people in my generation, with you being the one who started the parties at Mendel. Yeah.
Yeah.
So talk about that a bit. Just how that got started, and
Sure.
and what was the concept behind it, and it wasn't a membership only thing, but
No.
it was something driven. I think it was kind of financially driven for the school.
At a later point.
Okay.
So, thank you all for having me here. And I have so much history. A lot of people here at this table, Craig, and you mentioned the Ritz, and God bless you. My hat's off to Fred. So all right. So I like to give people credit, man. You got to give them their flowers on this side. Duane has done some miraculous work in this city. Honestly, you got to give credit where credit's due. So actually I didn't start DJing at Mendel. I started DJing in '74, and I did a lot of different parties and caught on. And let me regress just slightly. So I was in 8th grade in 1974, late 73, 74. And a buddy of mine, Kenny Anderson, I had two different influences that started me. And one was my dad was bowling at Daddy O'Daly's Sunday morning men at Starlight Bowling Alley every Sunday. Every Sunday morning they have a DJ play jazz while the guys bowled. His name was Millard Green. And I remember Millard was the kind of guy that would play a lot of different types of music, and he would invite people to come sit down. A young Andre Hatchett at 4 years old, because his dad bowled with my dad, would sit behind Miller's thing and try to play jazz music on Sunday mornings. Just the stories here, how it interrelates with all Chicagoans are great. So anyway, Kenny Anderson's dad, George Anderson, was the engineer at Soul Train when it was still here at 126 West Jackson. And we would leave school some days and go down to Soul Train and watch his dad engineer the records. And then we had our 8th grade dance, and Kenny's father came out and DJ'd, and he brought the Soul Train dancers with him. I'm like, this is some amazing stuff here. And I'm watching George as he's manipulating the crowd, and the dancers are doing this, and what type of control you take as a DJ over people and take them on a journey. And he did a Lady's Choice, and the most popular Soul Train dancer at that point came and grabbed me to dance. Never was a great dancer. And we danced slow to Sexy Mama by the Moments. How could that not be indulged in your memory forever? So it hit me. I'm like, oh, this is just phenomenal. I could do this. And I started playing records. I was buying records at the local record shop. Then I joined a record pool. The first record pool I joined was Discotech in 1974. Then I went from there to the Dogs of War, and left the Dogs of War and went to a splinter group called the Fellas. The Dogs of War, by the way, was run by you guys were talking earlier about Eddie, Curtom Records. The Tom in that, Eddie Thomas, was running the Dogs of War. And we were getting records from all over the world. And we would have our meetings in the basement of McCormick Place Hotel. And each week they would have a different DJ, and they come in and battle with who would bring the biggest equipment, who would play the best records, who would introduce the newest stuff, and blah, blah, blah. So you had to be on your A game. So I just started playing, and I started doing parties for, I don't know if you remember Kevin McMillan, those guys. They had the Gents of Leisure at the Roberts 500 room. That's on 63rd Street. It's flattened now, where the all the railroad things pick up the freight cars and place them. And then I was doing the Ladies with Class parties at the University of Chicago Center for Continuing Education, at Salam. So I heard somebody mention earlier Salam. I was doing parties and just got the name out there. And then I went to high school at De La Salle first, because I was recruited for football, and left there and went to Mendel, and first day at Mendel, the activities director, Father O'Grady, asked us to put in a shoebox little trinkets that represented your life. I put a 45 spindle, because 45s were big to play at the time. I put a 45 spindle in there along with some other things and a patch of McDonald's, because in 8th grade I started working there. That's how I funded all this stuff. I worked at McDonald's at 13 and was the youngest assistant manager in McDonald's history at 14. So I'm buying equipment, I'm buying records, I'm in these record pools, things are rolling. And he said, well, what is this for? I said, I'm a DJ, and he said, well, we do this one dance a year where we send the money to the East, to the missions overseas. And we'll give you a shot at it. I said, okay. So they already had 2 DJs at Mendel. I came in immediately and blew them out the box. And in 1976, I said, late 75, I said, you know what? Mendel was it is now Gwendolyn Brooks High School. It's a 40-acre beautiful campus at 111th and King Drive. And it was uniquely where the gym sat over the cafeteria with ways up and down on all 4 sides. So you could keep a constant flow of people and 2 different DJs, one on each floor. And I started in the basement, worked my way up to the stage, and then by the end of 76, we were averaging 2,000 kids a night. So the Augustinians, who was the order that ran the school, they saw how they could benefit from the revenue, because Mendel was a school that had changed over. When I got there in 75, was still 60% white with about 1,900 students. And the white flight from Roseland, by the time I graduated in 78, was the first all-black graduating class with about 900 students. So the Augustinians, right, Braxton is a Mendel monarch. So the Augustinians said, we are gonna have to close this school. We can't operate a plant this big with half the students. And they had the gumption to listen to a 16-year-old tell them how to market, how to promote, how we can stage these dances and do it. And for over 12 years, we averaged 3,000 to 4,000 kids every Saturday night, some Fridays, concerts, you name it. We had, in the mid-'80s, early '80s, Lena would know this, I provided platforms for all the house artists to perform, from Jesse, Chip, Frankie, Ronnie, Jamie Principal, you name it. I gave them a platform to perform in front of 3,000 to 4,000 kids, and kids came from not only the South Side, well, it started out with them on the South Side and all the private schools and the Catholic schools, but it just grew up like that. And I ended up raising more than $15 million over the years. That kept the doors of the school open from 1979 to 1988. And was recently inducted into the Mendel Hall of Fame by the order that, yeah. So, yeah, that's one side of the story. But that's a story, and a lot of the house artists, Daryl Pandy used to host the talent shows with his signature line, "Stick me with a fork and see if I'm tender," and it was just it's a phenomenal piece of Chicago history that will never happen again. You will never get 3,000 to 4,000 kids in one place and not one incident happen.
Yeah, between you and Lil Lewis, you're responsible for generations, and that is one of the things that right now we talk about in this work, is that those key people who, what you did was cultivate new generations of it. You know what I mean? It wasn't just where the warehouse was the only place, or this was the only place. You know what I'm saying? Through like I said, people came from the West Side and all over to partake in these parties. And I was in 7th grade. You know what I mean? When I first started.
You were sneaking in there too?
Well, no, you didn't.
Everybody was sneaking.
Yeah, we all had that older sister. My sister brought me. And that's what it was. And so, talking about, like Craig saying, the events that he had that you had to be invited to, the membership, and then my sister brought me to your things. My generation now we have a home, and this is where we started kind of developing dance culture and our crews and everything else. And Keith was a part of a crew called FX from the West Side, front row. So, ooh, I said sorry. that's a no-no. Don't misrepresent the crew. Front row, which was one of the dopest crews from the West Side.
Yeah.
And I would like for Keith to talk, because another thing that's always never talked about is the West Side voice.
Duane, before you do that, can I just expound real quick on one thing regarding the dance crews and stuff? In '77, that was one of the biggest part of the Mendel popularity, were the dance groups. Started with the biggest group, which was the doctors. Then that spun the nurses, then the secretaries, then the men in high rank, who Carl Davis's son and Lerone Bennett's son was in it, and and the thing was, they would all wear their matching T-shirts and painter's pants, and the parties would virtually stop themselves. Just people gather around to watch these guys do these calculated dances and things, and I just want to expound on the crew part of it.
Eventually, was a part of Passion. I don't know if you remember.
Passion. Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
There was tons of men in high rank. I can go on forever naming the groups.
Oh yeah, and we battled. Yeah.
Yeah, and they would battle. That was the gang fight. You battled.
That was
you
the
battled
fight. Actually,
dancing on the dance
and
floor.
this was even happened outside. We would battle on the street, and that was our aggression.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean that.
Yeah, and so with that, Keith Green here was in front row. One of the crews. But yeah, talk more. Give more of a voice to what was happening in your culture from the West Side, with front row, and then there was FX, and then eventually there was the ambassadors, so on and so forth. And it wasn't just dance; it was fashion. It was, one of them. Yeah.
Thanks for having me. I'm Keith Green, and I was a part of a dance group called Front Row, and we were very popular, and we loved the house music. And what else you want me to
Don't be shy. Don't be shy.
Right, he's being shy for some reason today. But
That
front
was
row.
like, who was in it?
Right, front row was very popular for a reason, because you were one of the crews that really shined a light on the fact that this culture was living and breathing and existing on the West Side. And so that's the kind of thing that I want to get at, like what was transpiring on the West Side that even led you to, you know what I mean? Because it wasn't just that you came to the South Side and discovered something. There was things happening on the West Side.
Right, the parties on the West Side, the dance battles, fashions.
Was there particular spaces?
Yeah, where?
Yeah, the space like on the West Side was Da Vinci Manor.
That's right.
Da Vinci Manor. And,
Resurrection,
Resurrection,
Yeah.
exactly.
the Hamlin House.
High schools were prominent, like on the west.
Steinmetz, Austin,
Simon, yeah.
Westinghouse.
Who were your influences? Like, what other dance crews were your influences? How did you
Well,
start?
I got started. I was in a dance group. I was like about 12 or 13, and I was in a dance group called Paradise Dancers, and one of the girls that was in the group, brother was the one used to choreograph our routines, and he used to go to the Warehouse and all of those places, the Ritz, Rialto's, and all those places. And I was younger than he was. He was older, and my first experience with good music and people of all walks of life was he snuck me in the Warehouse one evening, you know, I was always I was tall for my age and everything, and when I experienced that, it was like, wow, I just couldn't believe like how the people were dressed, how people were excited about the DJ, the music that he was playing. No trouble, no violence. Everybody was just happy, and that the music just it motivates me, and um, it was a sense of freedom, and
That was those drugs.
and it took off from there. No, I wasn't doing. I was too young to do
Well,
drugs.
that was very
I
prevalent. in those
wasn't. If
clubs.
my parents would have knew I was there, I would have probably been in a world of trouble. But I was just motivated by the house scene, and it just took off from there. And wherever house music was being played or a party, I was there. I was gonna, you know, in the search of the good music and good positive energy.
So did you guys ever go to parties? Lou Lewis and Eric DeWiz used to DJ
Lil
at
Lewis was
on Sunday nights.
at the Ascot,
There
front
you
row.
go.
We were a part of that Lil Lewis
Mr.
area.
G's, Horizon
Mr.
West.
G's,
Yeah.
all of those places.
I just want
yeah.
to jog your memory. a little.
Yeah,
So-
yeah, yeah.
Just so y'all know,
I went to a funeral last week. A friend of mine, she died, and she went to Corliss High School. And I was,
my alma mater.
but this is when you know you've done something historic. In her obituary was written that one of the greatest times in her life were the parties at Mendel. She spent the parties at Mendel. I mean, my girlfriend, she used to kill me with this, and we'd be in grocery stores, and women would come up to me crying and stuff, saying how they met their husbands at Mendel and this and that, and you know, and I know I heard you talk about Steve Poindexter. You know, one of the first DJs I brought in with me to do downstairs when I did upstairs was a guy named Tony Poindexter. He had a little brother named Steve Poindexter. Well, Tony ended up leaving after the first year, and his little brother stayed with me for years and years, working with me with John Hunt, and the proudest thing I have to carry away from anything in this business is the number of people that I've brought into this business, from Ferris to Chip to First Lady to, I mean, they all just, and that's what you gotta leave. You gotta pay it forward, do your thing, move on,
Yeah.
so the next generation can do their thing, and that's what I've been preaching for years. Except for that, you know, it was a business too. We made a business out of it, and you know, when you're trying to do something for a living, it can't be part time. You know, you've got to do it, and you got to go all in. So.
But I went to Steinman.
Steinman.
That's why I graduated from Steinman. Because I was in dance, modern dance too. So Winnie Young or all those schools.
Kurt was one of the first people who had no problem with the LBGT community working with me. We had drag queens. Okay?
By the way, Duane, I was talking to you earlier about the party on 75th and Evans.
Don't.
He gave me Hank was the guy's name. It was a trophy store, and they would sell trophies by day, and at night they would clear it out and have some of the biggest parties. And remember, Jock was a designer. He would design all that.
Yes.
They'd be
But-
flowing and out.
But he was never discriminate. He was just the professional that you see today. He was that same guy that you see today. I just want to just say that.
Money's green. It's not.
It don't care what gender you are. It just pays the bills. Yes.
No.
Oh wow.
Yes.
Longer.
So the Jamal Moss here is another person that I owe a debt to. I mentioned this on Facebook because he was my walk into my individuality. He and I were also a part of a crew together called Generation 2000, or G2000 for short, and we would eventually be Lil Lewis's street team, which we didn't recognize it back then. We were just passing out flyers and getting in parties for free. But you know, I discovered the North Side and all this stuff hanging with this fool right here, without kind of follies. But he was the one that like Medusas and just G2000. We wasn't even a dance crew really.
No, we was hanging out at Tim's house, being freaks of nature.
Being early, yeah.
Yeah, the tall, light-skinned black Dutch boy. No, someone might remember him. Yeah. She's
But this is a walk out of. So now when we talked about dance crews earlier, when I talked about passion and we talked about these people, those things were kind of more the preppy side of the era before it became officially like house culture or whatever. And preppy era, those dance crews were definitely much more calculated in their moves. It was like you had your moves. Whereas when you walked into house culture, it was more about your expression and individuality.
It was performance art. It's the best way to put it.
And so with this crew, it's where my individuality began. The way we dressed, we didn't dress alike. Like, you know how we talked about everybody had the same T-shirt and the same whatever. And you can identify us because we were just weird as hell, from wearing skirts and striped tights and to whatever, kind of like what I call the Blitz kids of the UK was the crew that Boy George, Sade, John Galliano was out of a crew called the Blitz Kids in the UK. And we were sort of like the Blitz Kids of America, of Chicago. And so I kind of want Jamal to kind of talk about just like how you moved in it. Because again, I saw him and our friend Clint, rest in peace. And I was just like, what is it? My mother more so was just like, who is these fools? You didn't go over here. This one got his face painted white and this and the other. But we also discovered that what I discovered with these crews was that these was also our forms of protection. Having crews and being, I remember we would walk down the street and of course looking the way we looked, we were getting, look at them, when you was called house, it wasn't actually an endearing term because it was really trying to say, look at them house fags, and things of that nature. And so having a crew was more also not just about us being like-minded, like can do it, but it was also strength in numbers. So yeah, I just want Jamal to expound on his experience with that.
Hello, everybody. Thank you for having me. I appreciate this. Best way I can put it is I just feel like it was a group of people who came together that aspired to be better than their surroundings. What little means that they have to I guess we say to shine bright in the world of darkness from the backgrounds we came from, and it just kind of we met each other. It was kind of like organic Facebook, but it was in person. Like I said, Tim's house was kind of like the meeting point, and then like a couple other people's houses was a meeting point, but Tim was kind of like the clubhouse for the strange kids. Let's just put it that way. Mm-hmm. So it's kind of one of those things. Like originally I was brought into the Ambassadors by Zero. That's a whole other story. Got out of that real quick, and then jumped into Ecstasy, and I wasn't feeling that because there was some strange stuff. And then we was at Tim's house. It was like, yo, G2000, because I think that's when Clint came over with somebody else, and we were just all power. I think it was Batman. A whole bunch of us was over there just hanging out one night. It was like a Tuesday, Wednesday night, and we decided this is the route we was gonna take, and we would go out places and try to meet up, and we would go to like we would be like the opposite of the weekend party people. We would try to find parties that was happening on weeknights. So if it was a Wednesday night, Monday night, Sunday night, that was kind of our thing, because by the time 88 came around, everything was really over commercialized and sanitized, and we were still looking for something that was more deeper, had more meaning to it. So in that mental process, it showed physically, so that's how come our way of dress came about. So we tried to out deep each other. You know what I'm saying? So you gotta realize something. Somebody has a lawsuit against Jinko jeans and those big raver pants back in the day, because we started that mess. We used to take curtains off the wall and have people like sew our pants to be flared like as big as possible, and put the peace signs and all types of emblems, the Ankh, you know what I'm saying, the eye, you know what I'm saying, all that stuff. And I think to this day, it's like the Truman Show. Somebody was documenting us and not telling nobody, because I'm telling you, a 91 hit, everybody was looking like how we used to dress, and then it was this whole thing, and that had me just scratching my head. This is just something weird about that. But it was cool because we inspired other people too as well to be free and come out their shell and to come into their own, no matter if it happened to be artistically, culturally, or sexually, or just being what it is to evolve and be aware as a human being, you know what I'm saying, and your process, you know what I'm saying, of evolving. And that's the best way I look at it. And because of that inspired me to want to venture out to other places, just not in a black environment, but in a human environment. And that's why places like Medusa's and Limelights and McGreevy's, I was going off the beaten path trying to discover other stuff. But I wanted to give props to that gave me the mental divergence when it comes to music. All due respect to Ron Hardy, but it was KKC. When I used to listen to Pink House and all those cats, they would like give you the box experience on the radio, especially if you wasn't old enough to get there, so you would hear all these eclectic sounds. So that's what my wavelength, you know what I'm saying, tapped into, was hearing this obscure, you know, punked out shows or industrial or art noise stuff. You know, I knew about, you know, Throbbing Gristle and like Lazy Jones Dangerousas and DAF, because they would mix that with some disco and then some boogie and whatever else. And then when they would say, okay, you might be too young to get in here, but you can go to Dancers. Lewis did a night, you know, for a while down on right by Columbia College in that hall upstairs. It became the Hot House after that. So it was just like I was looking for more obscure places like that, because to go to the regular place, I don't disrespect, but a lot of thugs, you know what I'm saying, started to show up and was ruining the environment. So you just didn't want to go around that. And the thugs made fun of the male guys and called us gay or whatever it was. But they always came to the house parties because the women were top tier when it came to Chicago, the way they dressed, the way they looked, the mannerisms, all that stuff. So it gave this weird dichotomy, and then we tried to go off, you know, and do our own thing separate from the foolishness. So I really appreciate those experiences I had in the past, which still makes me very eclectic in what I do now. And a lot of people understand that Chicago will always be in my heart, but I travel the world to try to bring that culture when I go internationally to a lot of places. And it's kind of like I freak them out because I am that black person that's like no other that they experience, especially coming out of Chicago. So I've been pigeonholed as always this alternative Negro, which is always kind of like annoyed me, because they try to make me the poster child for Afrofuturism. A lot of people don't even know that. They try to say I was the next Sun Ra, and I was like, yo, he's dead. I'm alive. That's kind of, let me build my own legacy, which is beautiful, because I got a chance to actually work with the orchestra and a lot of jazz musicians, a lot of like avant-garde people. So I guess that was the universe is saying, don't fight it too hard, because I'm trying to guide you the way you wanted to since you was younger, from hearing the airways of the music, the songs we was pushing out. So it's always had me in this different light. And I'm glad to be part of this panel, because what I want to do is try to reach back to the youth and other people in Chicago and say, be different, be divergent, you know what I'm saying? Because that's what made our sound unlike any other place on the planet, you know, with acid house and jack tracks and, you know, whatever term you want to put to it. It's always been the mix of, I would say it was more emotional with a tinge of intellectual process in making the music. Right now, when I travel, a lot of things are sanitized. So when I go do live shows, I still carry what I did on the floor, dancing with him and other people through those sounds when I perform. And it freaks people out, and they say, what is this? I'm just like, this is what I came up with. So that's why I'm glad this is happening, so you can document this, so the rest of the world can know about this. Because I'm telling you, when you step out of Chicago, everybody else is in their fields feeling what they was doing was the first and the best, and nobody can compete, you know what I'm saying? And I try to tell them it's not true, but it's hard because there's no documentation, because New York beat us by a mile, because they've been programmed and been in a type of system when it comes to media to document everything. Because it's part, you said, the business, the hustle, so they learn to document stuff early and quick and fast. We were too busy dancing and enjoying the moments, you know what I'm saying, feeling the spirit, instead of let the technology take over, you know what I'm saying, the moment. But I'm glad it's happening now, and it's better late than never. And that's what I can say about the experience. But, you know, I took in Medusa's. Yeah, his experience, he was freaking out, but I just say, no, just let it go. But I guess he felt better when he realized Armando and the rest of those cats started coming and doing parties, so it made him feel a little bit better.
I mean, real quickly, man, I was born in Stateway Projects, from Playwood to Inglewood, and when you took me to Medusa's and I walk in and somebody has a hamster on their shoulder, Like, that's a rat. What's up? But I want to move because I know this panel has to,
Yeah.
whatever. But you brought up something that leads me right into the thing. So when you talked about, the persecution we started feeling being called house fags because thugs are coming because the women of house were
Queens,
the
queens, all day.
So with
Queens.
that, I want Larissa to expound on, because being a woman on the house scene and safe space and having those experiences of guys who are not of the culture coming into the clubs to get y'all. Yes. Yeah. So, lady, for Larissa, yeah. So this, okay.
So I wasn't in any type of club. I grew up in Hyde Park, so the neighborhood was the club for me and my social crew and social network. And I also went to Kenwood, which is a big house community. So my influence stemmed from Andre Hatchett, and Frankie Knuckles would frequent there, and many of the DJs would spin at the sock hop. But early on, my influence stemmed from my mom, who was a disco queen, and my dad was a jazz musician. So I pretty much have always been in the club. I tell this narrative all the time, and I grew up in the Nation of Islam, but was never really fully accepted. And like he was talking about, my mom encouraged me to be that individual, but with my dad, there was always a pushback and him wanting me to be something I wasn't. So I metamorphed into something else. My inspirations on the house scene were Tony Shelton and Rhonda Flowers. Tony Shelton lived in the building across from me, and I would see her like almost every day. I would look out the window, and my brother was like, "Oh, here she comes," and I would look out the window at her, and she was so beautiful. And sometimes we would have battles in the courtway, and it was rap on one side and there was house on the other. So we had that dual kind of thing going on, and Tony Shelton would come out and dance, and she would have her fashion on, and she would do her dances, and she was a promoter back then. And I went to Lewisworth, so Lewisworth would share the lunchroom at Kenwood, so I would see Rhonda Flowers, and they were, back then we're talking about 1984, 83, 84. So I would be standing in line, and I would see them, and they would be passing out all the flyers, and to me, you dream about the parties and you dream about doing things, but you're not in a situation where you're actually doing it. So I did go to the parties, and my father would drop me off, but I would make him drop me off like 4 blocks, like down, and I would just walk. And he's like, every time you go out, you look like you going to war. Because I was wearing like clothes from the Belmont Army surplus. I was shopping at the alley. I had the buttons, I had the combat boots, the black lips, the mohawk, all of that. So I wouldn't say I was house, but I was more punk, So that was kind of like my dress. So, and I still wear a mohawk, but it's more like a conservative mohawk. Yeah. So conservative mohawk. So for me, house music, the music. Our meetup spot was Dunkin' Donuts on Belmont. I was also a club kid of Medusa's. I was also a club kid of Club Naked. I was into house music, but I was more like on the alternative, on the punk scene. So I kind of shifted and moved. And my brother went to Hills. I never made it to Mendel because my parents were adamant on us not crossing 51st. The boundaries of 51st for some reason. So I never made it to Mendel. But my brother went to Hills. So I went to those parties. But back then, just that whole experience of being house. You just felt so free in our crews, and we were like the black punkers and the black ravers, and you felt like, goth. It was like an army. It was like it was just so it was amazing to me. So
quick question for you. Did you ever go to McDonald's on 87th Street?
no, I said we could
Jane
not go
Crow,
past 51st, man.
Tony Shelton, just for Disco Tony and all.
No, and I,
We call it McErnals, because it was like the Ernals where everybody gathered and Tony, Disco Tony, all of them. And so I was just wondering.
so they're 3 to 4 years older than me.
Oh, okay.
And I knew that they were promoters and party goers, but I couldn't go to the parties. I wasn't that old, but I would see them like at different other parties, like at sock hops and things like that. But I never got to go to any of their other parties because they were much older than me. So I'm gonna share with you.
So we have, a short time, later,
Yes.
who also I met at Medusa's on the dance floor. And I knew that she was going to go on to be active in dance culture because this girl was a straight up dancer.
Hey y'all.
And I thought I was a dancer, and then I was out of breath, and I was like, all right, forget it.
They're like, nah.
You go home.
You can have it.
and keep the floor. But she's done so many things, and what we did mention in her bio is that, the Footwork Kings.
Fast forward.
Before-
but I want to talk about foundation first before
Yes.
we even fast forward. And I'm probably going to do a bunch of fast forwards because of time. But peace, love, and respect to everybody in the room. My name is Leida Garcia, better known as Lady Soul. That's SOL, and that's been since the 90s. Thank you, Honeypot Performance Collective, Miss Johnson and Duane and everybody that has assembled this beautiful communal space for us to come together and share a few stories. But so I'm probably, sort of on the later side. I didn't start partying till '89, but mind you, I was in 8th grade. And our to-go-to spot was the Riv by Tony Batoy. And that was a huge space also where you could probably easily fit 1,000 kids, maybe 1,500, 2,000 on Sunday nights. And it was a 17 and over club. I was able to get into the space because I was rolling with the infamous Kamikaze crew from Humboldt Park. Right. I'm always the only one. Hey, y'all. That seems to be the thing throughout my years, finding myself, in various spaces. But that particular club night is where you found kids from all different walks of life, Black, Asian, white, Latino, Latina. Everybody gathered there, and it was a beautiful party and concert space. I was introduced to the freestyle movement that was, coming through there, 'cause Tony Batoy was flying in artists from everywhere, particularly New York, the Cover Girls, George Lamond, so he definitely was speaking to the Latino community, I would say, because he packed it out. And that's also where I was introduced to hip house. So Fast Eddie, being the leader of that movement and saying, yeah, okay, we're within house, but this hip hop thing, and I guess nobody wanted to get on any of his produced, sounds from the West Side. And so he said, F it, I'll just do it myself then. And then I think Tyree Cooper came on and Mr. Lee, and it was at the Riviera where I caught the attention of Mr. Lee's dancers and his choreographer, and they were just like, damn. Oh, is that, see, you have to remind me. Yeah, okay, see, there it is. And Wayne Williams, the connection to Mr. Lee as well, and Jive Records. And so that's where my dance career, started at again, 8th grade, entering high school. Throughout high school, everything evolved to being a club dancer, a crew dancer, to becoming a tour dancer, and taking our music out into the world. I think it was when we went to Italy with Byron Stingley in Tent City, and I didn't know, that Chicago in general, that our genre, our style, all of that was huge, in Europe, and those opportunities just gave me perspective. you know, and I think after all of those opportunities of traveling and working with all these amazing singers and producers, instilled in me that those experiences must be brought back to the community. Yes, maybe they cannot go and tour, you know, to the places where I have, but I'm able to bring those experiences back to young people and say, your dreams are valid, and dream as big as you want to dream. And that gave me that was my passport to the world. You know, my family migrated from Mexico in the mid-'70s, but I was shipped right back. So the funny part was that I came back an immigrant. I came back floating on a tire. And the ironic part is that my name derived from an illegal Social Security that my aunt was using. And my mom liked the name, and she was like, yeah, we're going to call her Leyva. Right. So I got the name from the illegal Social Security number, but I was the only one born here. So I was, you know, I was the golden child. I was the hopeful child, you know, like, okay, we're gonna drop her, and then everybody else is gonna come over. So it's been a very interesting journey for me, just generally to be a part of Black culture, because essentially that's, you know, where I've been thriving my entire life, from house to hip hop to reggae to dance hall, yeah, here I am speaking on this panel with some beautiful and legendary individuals, and I'm grateful for that.
And I so hate, because there's so much on this panel that we can talk about.
Oh, and I have to say this, my son Jasir is over there with the camera. Wave your hand, Jasir. He's definitely a product of my involvement in house culture, because I met his father at Medusa.
His father was the bouncer at Medusa's,
Yeah,
actually.
his father was the bouncer at Medusa's, and he's the one that allowed me to get in. So that's okay. I have nothing to hide. That is Jasir Bailey over there, okay?
We have to be out of this space, but